Father in heaven, we thank you for this day that you have made. We thank you for the world that you have made. We thank you for creating us. We thank you for what you have done to bless us and the giving of the many gifts that you have given to us. We ask that you would watch over us at this time as we look into one of your greatest gifts, your word, that we may better understand it, that you would bless us to be able to understand how we can apply its wisdom to our lives, that our lives may serve you in the way that they should. We are grateful, Father, for all the things that you have done and will do, are doing. But Father, we are most thankful that you sent your Son Jesus as a sacrifice to redeem us. And we pray these things in Jesus' name. All right. So, as I say, Psalm 58. I should advance that here. For the chief musician, Altasheth, of David, a miktam. Do you indeed in silence speak righteousness? Do you judge uprightly, O you sons of men? Nay, in heart you work wickedness. You weigh out the violence of your hands in the earth. The wicked are estranged from the womb. They go astray as soon as they are born, speaking lies. Their poison is like the poison of a serpent. They are like the deaf adder that stops her ear, that does not hearken to the voice of whisperers, charming charms most wisely. O God, break their teeth in their mouth. Break out the great teeth of the young lions, O Yahweh. Let them melt away as water that runs apace. When he aims his arrows, let them be as though they were cut off. As a snail that melts and passes away, the stillbirth of a woman that does not see the sun. Before your pots feel the thorns, green and burning alike, he shall be swept away. The righteous shall rejoice when he sees the vengeance. He shall wash his feet in the blood of the wicked, so that men shall say, verily there is fruit for the righteous. Verily there is a God who judges on the earth. What is this psalm about? I heard something. No? That's all right. If you weren't answering me, that's okay. Yes?
To do away with the wicked man, the wicked rulers.
Yeah, getting rid of the wicked, particularly those in control. Yeah. What kind of psalm is this? Is this a psalm of praise? Would we throw it into that category? No. I'm getting a shaking head. Yes, that's correct. It is not. Not necessarily a psalm of praise. There is an element of praise to God at the end, certainly. Most psalms have some of that, but that it is not its primary purpose or form. Yeah?
I think basically a prayer for the sins and the treatment by the rulers that are wicked to be abandoned.
Yeah, it is certainly what is...
Vindicate the righteous.
Yes, yes. Destruction of the wicked, vindication of the righteous. It falls into what are frequently known as the imprecatory psalms. That is, it is praying for God to strike down the wicked and to present judgment to the wicked. But it also seems to, if we read the first few verses, I'm going to back this up again, it also kind of falls into the category of a lament. As we go through the first 5 verses, we see that the person is complaining or lamenting about the way that the rulers behave, right? That they are not, these are rhetorical questions, judging righteously and uprightly, that they work their wickedness, they weigh out violence, that they speak lies, that these things are things that oppress the people. Yes, sir?
Doing what you say?
I'm sorry?
Is it like doing what you say they're going to do?
Yeah, they're not following through on these things. They are not the people that they ought to be. And then we'll get into that, what happens next. But it begins with a kind of lament over that injustice and then finishes with the imprecation against them as to what should be done. Yeah?
A little subtlety there comes out. You know, we assume that babies are born innocent.
Mm-hmm.
We try to apply the original sin.
Yeah.
But basically we assume that the child is innocent at some point of known accountability, and yet he's making the point that they're wicked from the womb.
And We will indeed talk about that. Yes, there's a key point that is coming up. Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry, but I don't know what the word imprecatory
Sure,
means.
sure. And imprecatory is essentially a curse or a request for judgment to say, may God strike you down, essentially. That these are psalms that are prayed in a way for the psalmist, the speaker, even if you're not the original writer, asking for God's judgment and his might to be exerted against those who are wicked or evil, those who oppose God's people. And these often present people with, and we've talked about this before, they're not frequent in the Psalms, but they're certainly not unknown. These sometimes present a kind of mental problem for people who are Christian, right? That we have, and as we ought to have, inculcated this mindset. We have adopted that mindset of Christ, that we are to turn the other cheek, that we are to be forgiving of our enemies, that we are to pray for those who persecute us. And that is all true. But I don't think that there is then any really real contradiction between asking for God to act in a way that is just. Right? That we ask God for justice. For ourselves, who are his children and have his mercy, to be vindicated. We can ask as well, again, for others to come to know that mercy, to be forgiven as we are. But God is also a God of justice, and asking him and wanting him to exert justice on behalf of the innocent is not wrong. We are not God in that we can hand out judgment and justice. We cannot take it into our own hands. But exalting God for having that power and exerting that power, that righteous power of his, is not wrong. Yeah.
Just an observation, since we've got off on this a little.
Sure.
Old Testament times, the idea of justice being meted out there and then. I mean, look at the times that God went out and destroyed nations,
Mm-hmm.
and wishes of people for that to happen, are remote and went on. And it seemed like if you read it all, that was kind of the way that things should be. But when Christ came, that mindset kind of went away with what Christ had to say. Is we're no longer to think that way of our enemies. We're supposed to forgive. We're supposed to not have those thoughts. And not for us to take that actual action against our perpetrators. Whereas in the Old Testament, it seemed like it was okay for people to do that.
I would disagree with that. I don't think that that's quite the right characterization of the way that the Old Testament system worked under the law and the way that Christ tells us coming. Because it was never the case that when your neighbor wronged you, you could just simply go straight back to your neighbor and hurt him in return in the same way that he had hurt you. Even under the law, that was forbidden. What the law established was the just punishment for which you could appeal to a judge. That you could go to the judges and say, here is my neighbor who has killed one of my livestock. Give me justice. And they, consulting the law, would say, indeed, it says an eye for an eye and a just recompense for this. And they would take that a corresponding animal from your neighbor and give it to you. And now justice has been served. But it was never within the conception of the law that we would, on our own, go out and execute vigilante justice wherever we found injustice, or that every time someone struck us, we ought to strike them in return. The Pharisees corrupted this understanding of the law, the understanding, we know this with the giving, right? The giving of 1/10, the tithing into, you have to measure everything exactly in its 10% amounts, which was not the intention of what God established in the law for giving. And in the same way, people would corrupt that, the idea that if someone injures me, I am allowed to be the one to injure them in return. And Jesus rebukes this notion, saying, this is not the nature of the law. This is not what you are to do. right? We are not agents of God's justice in every case. And when we are aggrieved, we can appeal to a judge. And we see this in Romans, I believe, 13? I didn't have it ready because I wasn't necessarily going to go this far in this direction, but the government is the agent of God's justice, both for our defense, our protection, as well as a source of fear and retribution should we do wrong. And that has been consistent through the Old Testament into the New and even into today. You were going to, yeah.
Not only were you able to pay back what he has wronged you, but also then you say tenfold.
Well, again, there's nuances to the law in terms of what has been done and what can be done in return. Some injuries are not able to be repaid in exactly the same manner. For example, the inadvertent killing of another person, right? What we would understand as manslaughter, right? Someone has died. But because it was not deliberate, the punishment for that falls short of killing the person who has done it. How do you exactly recompense for an accidental killing? How can you then accidentally kill them in return? It doesn't make sense, it doesn't work, right, in a practical way. But the law was established to deal with these circumstances, and they had judges, they had kings eventually, who were supposed to then arbitrate and execute the law and put this into practice. And again, the Pharisees and over time the Jewish leaders in the Sanhedrin had corrupted this understanding of the law, right? We see this in the way that Jesus talks about the Sabbath, right? The Sabbath is intended for mankind to have a day of rest on which they can glorify and worship God. And the Pharisees had turned it into an oppressive thing. It had become an oppression on men so that they did not know what they were supposed to be doing and were constantly in a state of fear and worry and anxiety about were they transgressing the Sabbath law. And it had no longer become a restful time that God had given to them. They had turned it into shackles. Anyway, I'm really running away. There's lots to be had, a lot of conversation here, but there'll be more imprecatory psalms when we can get into these matters again. The interesting thing about the very first verse of this is that the word silence only appears in the ASV's translation. If anybody has any other translation, you'll see that the word silence does not actually appear in verse 1. And this is because it is, in some ways, a bit of a difficult rendering of this line. Do you indeed in silence speak righteousness? How do you speak in silence? The word there is silence. You would have to actually do a different pointing, which is the way that you can think of as kind of verbs maybe are arranged within this word in order to come up with other words, right? People sometimes have rulers, sometimes in some translations it's the congregation. But neither of those really makes a lot of sense because you have to alter the word that is there. Though,
you can speak in silence by not doing something that you should.
and I think that's the correct way to understand this, right? Do you, by your silence, actually do the thing you were supposed to do, which is to speak righteously? When appealing to judges and rulers, they should speak justice. They should say the right things. They should rule correctly. And when they withhold that, when they don't say and do the things they should do, the rhetorical question then is, are you really doing and saying what you ought to be doing and saying? No. No, the understood answer is no. And it goes very well with the next verse, or excuse me, the next line of the verse. Do you judge uprightly? Are you judging correctly? And the answer, again, the rhetorical answer, no. No, they are not. This is not what they are doing. This was the point about changing the word. The questions are clear enough. Justice is not being done. 2 then follows up with an actual answer, right? No, they are wicked. They are wicked at heart. This goes to the very core of their being. This is not just superficial. This is not, oh, that's really tempting, I'm going to go ahead and do a wrong thing. This is integral to who they are as people. The wickedness comes from deep within. What two objects do we traditionally associate with the idea of justice?
A scale and a sword.
A scale and a sword. Yes. Yes. Why a scale and a sword?
Balance the good and the bad, and then the sword is that you use it.
The power of the law to execute judgment, and the sword and the scale to show the careful weighing of the matter. To balance one thing against another, to understand that. And we get that implied perversion of justice in verse 2 by the fact that they do not weigh out justice. The verse says that they weigh out what? Violence. They weigh out violence instead. Justice specifically is being corrupted. It is not just one individual person doing this against another individual person. Rather, this is those in power, those in authority, who are corrupting their own job, their own role within society.
Well, I think that's, I think that can be shown around part of the world now. I don't think that ever changes.
Oh, no,
I
no.
just think it finds a new depository.
Sure, right? This was, I mean, it's been a long time now, but this was the lesson, right, from Ecclesiastes. That we talked about Ecclesiastes. None of this changes. Everything is the same. Everything that has been done is being done now. It will all be done again. People are the same. They have always been the same. And it will be that way till the world is broken and destroyed and remade. And then when Jesus returns. Yeah. It is not a new thing. But that is specifically then here what this psalmist is complaining about. The psalmist here is also not so obviously David. This is one of those cases where the of David really seems to be in that Davidic style in terms of the meaning of that superscription. Because there are very few, if any, I don't think there's any personal remarks or comments here. This is all very generalized and speaking of a corporate group of people, the body of the people, right? The common people are presenting a complaint to God, a lament and then a complaint for God's justice, rather than any one person. And it is against those in power and authority. So here's the point about the very young. Is verse 3 implying that we are wicked since our birth, since the moment we exist? Is that possible? Are some people just born bad?
Well, we're born with both.
We're born with both. What do you mean by that?
Bad and good.
Okay.
We're born of the flesh and we're born, and we have a spirit inside of us, so I would say bad and good.
Bad and good. Okay, Wayne, you were gonna.
Okay, this is kind of personal, but no. At birth, you're innocent. But I can tell you from experience that it is amazing what can happen to a child in the first 2 years of its birth that will change his life forever.
Oh, sure.
So, in answer to your question, no, I don't believe they're anything but innocent. But whatever the human touches over a very short period of time can make them different. And in this case, give them the basic ingredients of evil, if you want to call it.
Yes, sir.
It's learned behavior.
Okay, learned behavior. Yeah, I think there's some truth to this. What kind of thing are we reading? What is this that we are reading right now? It's a poem, a song, right? Do we always say what we literally mean within this kind of literature? In fact, what does the next verse say about these wicked people? What do they have, these wicked people? Venom like a serpent. Now, okay, is he literally saying that they have fangs in their mouth like a serpent where they bite you and then they inject their venom into your body and you die? Is that what he's literally saying?
Metaphoric.
No, it's a metaphor. He's being poetic. He's trying to express an idea through evocative language, through something that grabs your attention. How bad are these people? They're really bad. How can I say that they're really bad? I'll say they were bad from the moment they were born. This will give you an idea of how bad they are. How long have they been bad? As long as anyone can remember. How will I convey this idea? They've been bad since their mother gave birth. He's not necessarily trying to make, I think, a theological point about original sin. Whether you believe that that is the case or not, this would not be the verse to support it. Because he's being poetic about the nature of the evil rulers and how bad they are. He's trying to say how bad these people are. I don't think that people are born sinful. I think that we ourselves make sinful choices and do something that is wrong, and then we are in need of God's redemption and forgiveness. I think that happens to all of us, in part because we live in a fallen and broken world. We are corrupted. But this verse here, this particular passage, this psalm, is trying to make a dramatic point about who these judges are, what they have done, what sorts of things they do.
Usually when you see the word life, it means it's a metaphor.
It would be a simile, not to be pedantic. The metaphor doesn't use like, simile has like, yeah. But language points, yeah. That's not what we're driving at. We're not here to talk about idiom, unless I can, every once in a while. The word then that is used after this, or in this part of this, is estranged, right? That they are foreign, or they are a stranger. They've gone off the path, is what this word is, ever since they were born, or from the womb. Which is, again, part of this metaphorical idea, right? They have not been foreigners since they were born. It's not literal that they have been strangers to everyone since they were born. But again, it is an idea trying to express how at odds they are with everything else. That was not the note I thought I had next. They are strangers to the way of righteousness. They have forsaken the path that they should follow. They are no longer in the right way. They have gone astray. Verse 4 continues with the theme of the idea of them speaking evil, right? That we have from the very first couple verses. That they are judging, that they are presenting these kinds of pronouncements, that the words from their mouth are dangerous, because it uses the idea again of the serpent. The danger from a serpent, it's poison, the venom. They don't know that they draw a distinction between poison and venom within Hebrew necessarily. I'm not sure. But it comes from its mouth. Right? This continues the idea that the danger of these people is in the things that they say. They are not necessarily violent men in the things that they do. They are the corrupt judges who say things that cause harm and injury. Why a deaf adder? And this is the origin of the English idiom to be deaf as an adder. Not a common one anymore, maybe, but.
An adder's a snake. Does that snake not have ears?
Oh, it does. Adders have ears. They can hear. I heard, did I hear someone else?
Just deadly poisonous.
Yes, they're very dangerous, very poisonous. Yeah.
Wasn't that an adder that bit Paul?
Might have been. I don't know. I'm no, what is it, herpetologist? It tells us in the next verse, in fact, why a deaf adder. It is not actually deaf, it closes its ears. It is deliberately deaf. It is obstinate and will not listen. The comparison here is to a snake ignoring the snake charmer, ignoring the one who is supposed to control it. And it becomes, again, metaphorical for these judges, because they are not truly the ones in control, not truly within the nation of Israel. They should not be the supreme authority. Who, in fact, is the supreme authority? God, yeah. God should be the authority. But like an adder that refuses to listen, that refuses to comply, they have become dangerous, a threat to everyone around them because they will not listen. God attempts to direct them. God provides his law, God provides his prophets, but these corrupt and evil judges and rulers close their ears to what he says, will not follow his directions, and they are dangerous to everyone around them. They cannot be depended upon to do what they should do. So after 5 verses of a lament, complaining, speaking of their problems, what is it that they are suffering from, the next 6, the second half, which we will not get to all of them because I'm looking at that clock, the second half of this is the request to God, right? The desire for God to act, and then the conclusion, as most of these psalms conclude, with the confident expectation that God will act, and then speaking of it as almost as if it was an accomplished event. Why broken teeth? The first verse requesting God's action or asking for this judgment is the famous imprecatory request to break teeth. No teeth, no bite, but why? Why use that, right? They're not literally biting people. I certainly wouldn't think so. I would hope not, but...
It's just a metaphor for their actions. Their actions have teeth.
Yes, it is a continuation of the same thing, right? They speak. We're talking about mouths. We use the idea of the serpent which bites, and then moving further into the action, break their teeth, take away the source of the danger. What is it that they're doing? They're using their mouth as an aggressive tool. And so the request, again poetic, is for God to remove the danger in that way. Break their teeth. An adder with broken fangs is not the same threat any longer. They use the lion, the young lion here, to remove or destroy the teeth of them as young lions. Again, a young lion is dangerous. They're powerful. They have an appetite, right? They're known to be ravenous and to be willing to consume almost without limit, right? The idea is that they are anxious to do this, and so this is how bad and how serious the danger is. Yeah?
Lack experience, too.
And they have, yes, they lack experience or any sort of discretion, right? Yeah. The younger lions just simply roam about, seeking whom they can devour. Yeah. The danger is to be eliminated, and then the request is for the wicked themselves to disappear. The next series of metaphors, the next series of figures are about the disappearing or the destruction of these wicked people. There's the metaphor of water, right? Water that rushes away. Has anybody ever seen this happen in a desert environment? You get a sudden rainstorm. Yeah. And the rain falls.
We were driving through Phoenix one time, and 15 minutes after the rain started, we were watching cars floating down the freeway.
Yeah.
That's how the washes are created, right? In Arizona and stuff, we used to ride the washes with quads and stuff like that, right? They're deep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the same idea. The words used here bring to are of this kind of concept that they would have had. It would be common in Israel, right? That you would have the sudden rainstorm, a lot of violent water coming down very quickly, and then any low place, any gully in the ground, you need to stay out of that because very quickly, very soon, it is going to be full of water moving very, very fast. And this is the idea that is being used in the request for God to make them go away. Melt them away as if it were like this kind of water rushing off. Because even though it is violent and it is abrupt, it is here and then it is gone. It doesn't last that long. This isn't a river that continues to flow in a slow and steady and stately way. This is a very brief, rapid, and then it's gone. And this idea of it being brief and a rapid destruction and being swept away continues through these kinds of things. These are very temporary kinds of figures that he is going to use. The second half of this verse, this is such an interesting one. This is kind of up there with the idea of silence in the first verse, that it doesn't really seem to fit real clearly, and a lot of people have spent a lot of time thinking and spilling ink trying to understand this. There's a reference to arrows, and then different translations will give a different word for what they are doing with them, right? To draw the arrow, to aim the arrow, to shoot the arrow, right? Bending of the bow. The reason is that the word here is normally the one for bending the bow in order to string the bow. Where you would step, it's actually the word to tread, to step on the bow. Where you put your foot on the ground and brace it so that you can bend it and put the string over it. But it's used not for a bow, but for arrows. And so nobody's quite sure. It's a weird and kind of strange usage. This might be the only way that this is used, but it seems to clearly be, because they asked for the arrows to not work, a reference to the using of arrows in some way, to shooting, to aiming. Again, nobody's quite sure, because this is about the only usage of this specific way of doing it. Other places it merely speaks to stringing a bow and use this word. I just thought that was interesting and fun. But the word for the arrows here is also unusual in that they're to be cut. It can also be understood as to wither. It is the same word used in a different sense. This is usually a word for plants, right? You cut a plant, it will wither. And so the word has the same association, the same ideas. Again, a very strange thing for arrows. Why would you do this, right, to arrows? Why would you still shoot an arrow that had been cut? The idea is a little unusual, but the metaphor, the meaning does seem clear, right? That in their preparation for injury, in their attempt to attack or to do injuries, that it not succeed. That it be as if their arrows were cut or withered, right? An arrow that was not stiff and strong is not going to function.
So they essentially be ineffective.
Ineffectiveness, yeah. The whole thing is clearly an idea for ineffectiveness, but the way that the words are used is very unique and unusual. Linguistically, it's a strange thing to say, but in terms of any sort of theological meaning or import, it's quite clear what they're asking to have happen.
Got two different translations. One says the arrowhead will be blunted, and the other one says the arrow will be headless. Not even have a head.
Yeah, I wasn't necessarily going to go here. The word here also is the same or a similar word, a version of the word used for circumcision, which is why you get the idea of the arrowhead being removed, perhaps. Yeah. But again, the whole idea is for the arrows themselves to not work the way that they are supposed to. Yeah. Do snails melt?
Is what?
Do snails melt
When it gets hot.
when it gets hot? Okay, if it gets hot enough. It speaks of this as the snail that melts and passes away.
Salt.
You throw salt on it, that's true. I don't know that you could melt them. The thing that I was thinking about with this, and I did some reading, and there were a lot of people have a lot of different ideas about where they got this idea from and what this is exactly for, is what it appears when you see that a snail has passed by but it is gone. The appearance of it, because of the trail that it leaves, is that as it goes, it just simply dissolves itself, right? The idea that like a snowball or a piece of ice, right? That is a piece of ice and very warm, you could slide it and the friction melts it away and it just leaves that trail behind. I think the idea again is as they go, for them to be destroyed in their passing. That as they go about their business in their course of their daily life, for their disappearance to be accomplished. It's, again, an interesting kind of metaphor. It's clearly a metaphor of destruction, again, but fun and interesting. The second half of that verse, in verse 8, is a very potent image, though. Speaking of a child that is born, that is stillborn. And I think that this is an image of God's judgment and its rapidity. If you were to understand the judgment of God in the death of a child or the death of a person, or that a person is judged when a stillbirth occurs, this is, in some sense, particularly within a very modern medical kind of context, the earliest moment possible. This is the moment at which you know the worst thing possible has occurred. Death has arrived at the moment of life. Right? As birth occurs, so does death occur. And I think that this is essentially casting an incredibly strong image of very quick judgment. For God to judge now. A request for God to come and judge them immediately. And for judgment to be executed rapidly as well. A very, very, very strong image. 9 follows this up. It continues with the same idea. The thorns here, I'm going to probably have to go on last point. The word here for the thorns in the second usage of it, I believe there are 2 usages of the word thorns, though they don't always appear as thorns. There's a reference to green or fresh or dry thorns, is the blackthorn plant, which is a tree. They've actually been imported. Apparently they're around here fairly commonly as well. But they're native to the area, and they're very good for firewood. Apparently that when you dry them out, they burn really well. They burn very consistently. They don't have a lot of smoke. They're an excellent source of firewood. And so again, what is kind of a strange metaphor here with pots feeling thorns, it appears to be another metaphor for something that happened immediately. That before you can have the pot touch them, they will be swept away. That these thorns, these plants, to be taken off, whether they are burning, right, before they can feel the heat. The word, the thorn here apparently also can have some reference to feeling the prick of the heat involved. But before it can even begin, before you can put your pot on the fire, for that fire and all its fuel to be swept away. Again, following on the figure in the previous verse, that before things can begin for these evil people, they should already end. Before they can do anything else, they should be swept away. I'm going to stop here. I'm out of time. I'm a little over my time. The only last things here, or the last couple of verses, become a little more prophetic of end times, speaking of kind of total victory of God over all evil, rather than specific more to their time and place. But anything I rushed past too quickly, anything I skipped over, anything you... Yes, sir?
I did skip over it. I just wanted to make a point, follow up on something I said earlier that you took issue with. Where I was coming from was a perception can be made in looking at things in the Old Testament compared to the New with respect to when Christ was turned your cheek. In Exodus 21, verse 23, but if there is serious injury, you are to take life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, bruise for bruise. That's talking about an individual doing this, and I'm just saying that you can get the perception that Old Testament times allowed for those types of things to take place. When Christ came, not at all anymore. So I'm just trying to make a point of how one might think things.
Sure. In Exodus 21, though, the you there that is being spoken to, I don't know is individualized you to the entire nation of Israel, but is that the law being given to Moses as judge over Israel? Right? That the law is delivered to Moses, and Moses is established as judge to arbitrate and rule in terms of ruling in disputes over the people on behalf of God, exercising the law he has been given. I don't think, I should look it up again to be sure, of course, but I don't know that in Exodus 21 where the law is being dispensed, that the you is individualized to each person.
There's a question
Right.
whether you is you and I, or whether it's the judgment.
Yeah, that is,
Person in judgment, the court, or whatever.
it becomes the situation you have at the beginning of Judges, right, where it speaks of the judges, there being no king over Israel, and everyone doing what is right in their own eyes. They take the law into their own hands. And this is a negative element of the way that Israel functioned at that time, that they should have instead allowed the Levite priesthood and the prophets and judges that God appointed to exercise those laws and rules rather than doing it themselves. That was not what the law intended, I would say.
I guess I'm trying to defend the idea that it's easy to make a perception of things in the Old Testament.
Oh, sure.
Different.
Sure.
From what's in the New Testament.
People do frequently, take that position. I don't think that follows from what's there, given a careful reading, but yeah. Anyway, everybody has been very patient with me running another.
I guess it depends on what the meaning of this really is.
I'm not going to parse that semantic now, but you've been kind to allow me an extra 5 minutes. I appreciate it. We will move to Psalm 59 next week. Thank you.